Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for kind words and introduction. First of all, I would like to say that I must compliment GCTC for having organized this discussions seminar on cybersecurity. And I think all I would like to say that, you can't over emphasize the importance of this subject. Maybe if anything, it's late in the day, but I think it's a time when we have no choice but to really start talking about cybersecurity. So cybersecurity also changes the paradigm from defense in a big way. Unlike in many other things, when we look at defense in separation from rest of the society, in case of cybersecurity, anything that happens, even in the civil world, is actually has a huge defense implication. And if you were to disrupt power supply of a city, or if you were to disrupt any other civil operations, it has it directly impinges on what it means for the country. And so therefore, we are looking at a paradigm shift in terms of what's defense needs to do to be able to address in this regard. Given this complex subject, because the number of dimensions it has, today when we talk of cybersecurity, we have to look at the hardware dimension, which in itself is a very difficult dimension. There are no adequate tests. We can really know what really goes into a hardware device when we talk of cybersecurity. Similarly, on the software side, again, there are multiple ways by which software backdoors are kept or other malware is encrypted. I just heard, when someone said that phishing kind of attacks on his email were being made. So there are multiple ways by which cybersecurity manifests itself from a software perspective. But apart from this hardware and software perspective, there is this whole new dimension which has started coming, and that is that of information and data. In fact, today, data is, as they say, the new oil, but the importance of data is increasing. Data is increasing for multiple ways. One, in terms of the sheer, in defense, we talk of data being secret and sensitive, classified, restricted. But here, data, even when it is not, sensitive or classified, normal data of normal people across the country itself is of strategic importance. And this is one more aspect, like I mentioned earlier today, in cybersecurity, we have a paradigm which is very different, because en masse, when data of people's behaviors, people's attitudes, people's thoughts and values, etc., gets shared, you can influence the results of election in a country, you can influence who comes to power, you can actually change the morale of the country. So data of people is something, the new information war. Again, I would not want to talk in great detail about it, but the new information war that goes on is all about how you can manipulate the thinking process, the perspectives, the beliefs of people through the new digital technologies. And that's something which is a third dimension, in my opinion, as regards we have cybersecurity is concerned. And I would like to also talk about a fourth dimension, which sometimes does not get as much prominence as possibly it should. And that is regarding standards. Standards today is really, one way of creating lock-ins, which will then thereby force you to continue going that particular standard, which results in certain amount of, compromise on your sovereignty and your ability to take independent decisions. We are today, the world is extremely worried about how China is dominating the 5G standards. And from India's perspective, this is a very important aspect from two things. One is that, of course, when China dominates the standard, and given our own relationship with China, we need to be careful. But the larger issue is that when it comes to standards, we have really not been playing this part very actively in the world. Earlier, when it was 2G, it was Europe and America who was leading it, and now 5G, it is China which is leading it. Maybe the balance has shifted, but from our perspective, we continue to be logged in by one side or the other, and we have not been able to, contribute, participate, or have something which would thereby enable us to create our own set of systems. One of the related aspects on cybersecurity I would also like to mention is not a dimension, but is an aspect of human resource availability. I am aware that we have been talking about this aspect of cybersecurity in the country for the last at least 10 to 12 years, but even today, the number of people that we have which are available, despite significant growth over the last several years, I think is still very inadequate. The common level, you need different levels of exposure and understanding. I remember when I was in the Ministry of Electronics and IT, we used to run a massive nationwide program called Information Security Education and Awareness Program, where in practically most of the major universities in the country, we were supporting programs for all kind of people, starting from undergraduate, postgraduate, PhDs, short-term courses for mid-career professionals, etc. Despite all that, the gap that is given the space at which cybersecurity is proliferating in all aspects of our society, the number of professionals we have is far short than requirement, and the skill sets, because this is a continuously evolving and advancing field, it's new, learned online. I think there is a big gap that is required there. Having spoken about these different dimensions and the scope of this problem, which itself the idea was to convey how big the problem is and how pervasive the problem is, I would like to talk about a couple of specific things that possibly require immediate attention. And this is specifically also, while, like I said, there is some certain amount of overlap between the defense and civilian requirements when it comes to cybersecurity, because these areas overlap with each other to a large extent. But definitely from defense perspective, these are very important. The first thing is today that we have over the years in defense and in the civil space not been able to develop our ability in communication devices. I think this is one area that we need to take concerted efforts. Related to this issue is that there have been some efforts in the industry to develop routers and switches, but as is the case, given the branding and the lock-ins that we have created with imported devices, we find it very difficult to migrate from imported devices to domestically developed devices. It is very heartening to see that now industry today is taking us 5G network devices. Today, I believe that about 30% of the 5G components are being designed and developed in India. And that's quite remarkable considering that internally were zero in this regard. And there are also some reports that Reliance is in process of developing software components for the 5G core network, which is again going to be a big step forward in terms of the kind of security, because network is again the basic pillar on which any cyber security will depend. No matter how secure your end devices are, if your network is leaky, then everything else goes for a fud. So it's very important to have the networks, the capability of developing latest network devices which are indigenous and secure, and create mechanisms for that. It is similarly one of the things that we are today using in defense is software-defined radios. Software-defined radios are going to replace and are already replacing all different kind of radios that have been used by the armed forces for various applications. Huge impact if we continue to import our software-defined radios. And there is capability. DRDO has developed software-defined radios. Indian industry has developed software-defined radios. Startups have developed software-defined radios. So these devices, which are have such deep-rooted effect on our defense forces, I think we should encourage the use of the Atmanirbhar Bharat in those devices, those applications which are related to communication and etc. are extremely important. The other thing which I would like to quickly talk about is the location, location related. Today we are hugely dependent on GPS. We have today again developed our NAVIC, which location is so integral to any defense platform, any weapon, any surveillance, any monitoring that we do. And now that we are talking of precise weapons, we are talking of greater and greater degree of precision. The importance of location and navigation devices, I think with NAVIC, which is already being used in commercial space, defense, NAVIC is now something which needs to be taken up as soon as possible. I would also like to talk about the basic processor. Today, when we are importing any kind of device, the chip, even if we are assembling it here, even if we are integrating the platform here, even when we are talking of assembly of any of our major platforms, let it be MBT Arjun or else, even software-defined radios that we have developed here, the basic built-in device of processor is imported in all of this. And this is where I talked about the challenge with respect to lack of testing capabilities that exist in the country and inability to be able to be 100% sure that the processor or the device that we are using is secure and trusted. And it is in this regard, I think, a concerted effort that needs to be done is to promote the microprocessor which is developed and designed in India. And I am happy to mention that we are in process of working with IIT Madras and Incor, a startup which is based out of IIT Madras, on the Shakti processor which has been developed by them. It has already shown capabilities for doing significant amount of work like use in SDR and many other platforms. They have a whole roadmap of developing the most advanced kind of processors, 10 nanometer kind of capabilities, which is at par with the best in the world. So I think there are significant capabilities which have been created in this, and time is now ripe, given the kind of risks that we have on cybersecurity, to be able to use these devices. Lastly, there is so much more to say. You mentioned about artificial intelligence. It would be unfair if I do not talk of artificial intelligence. Putin has famously said that the country which will dominate the AI will rule the world in the coming year. I think AI is something which is data rich, and data security therefore becomes so important. Today, it is a fact that a lot of our data goes to various other countries in various forms, whether it is from social media, whether it is from mobile phones, or whether it is from innocuous devices. Now that we are looking at connected TVs and Netflix and all the other things, all the connected devices are potentially taking away data, consumer data of the third countries, which is something which is highly, like I mentioned, we are in a domain where the civil and the defense is getting merged, and this data can be strategically and offensively used against us. Again, for interest of time, let me lastly mention another area which I think is very important in terms of cybersecurity, and that is the way the concept of security itself is. Traditionally, we would used to be there was emphasis on making things secret, and I think that emphasis today is changing very fast. There is nothing called secret anymore. There is nothing which is not available in open source. today open source intelligence has become the mainstay of intelligence agencies world over, and so much so in India. So I think the question today is not really what is available practically, because all of us are in some way using devices. Families are using devices, mobile phones, TVs, etc. Whether it is at a personal level or at professional level, is getting stored in some device. It's being captured by some device in one way or the other. So therefore, the concept of trying to keep information secret is getting outdated. Your weapons are all digitized, are using digital technologies. Your travel is all getting recorded. So what is more important is, one, that information should not be available on real time, which makes a lot of significance. And second, to be able to use knowing fully that your data will finally get disclosed. The nature of strategies that you have to create may have to undergo significant change. A very simple thing which I would like to say, for example, is a country like India to decipher, maybe they will all train their systems to work on English and Hindi. But if we have a country which has over 200 languages, if we were to develop a code which would enable conversations or storage of data in languages other than Hindi and English, it would take that much longer for people to decipher it. And in this regard, another related issue, of course, you can keep going on and on, is the ability to develop encryption and decryption, which is totally very closely related to the whole idea of cybersecurity. Lastly, before closing, I will just say that the skill set in this regard is actually with the industry and with the startups. So what it means for today, there are some of the top brains in this sector are with startup. There are over 225 very good startups as per Data Security Council's report of 2020 that are operational in the field of, which have cybersecurity products which are being sold both in India and outside. The turnover is over $1 billion. The point I'm making is, our existing models, you have to develop a system of trust, because data has to be shared when you work with industry. Our present systems do not allow us to work in a system of trust with the vendor or with the industry. We have a typical buyer-seller relationship, a contractual relationship systems, where I give you some work, he finishes that work, takes his payment and goes away. I think here, when we are sharing the data resource and expecting a product as in return, the buyer-seller relationship will not work. We need to have partnership relationship with industry. Industry is the one which has the capability sets with respect to cybersecurity, and I'm not saying it is not there in the government. We need to develop capabilities within the government, but that will take a long time. We do not have the luxury of time to be able to do this. Therefore, I think what we need to do is to figure out ways by which we can work with industry collaboratively in a partnership manner, so that the skill sets that exist in the country are available, a strategy for cyber secure defense ecosystem. This is such an interesting topic. I could just go on and on for a while, but these are some of the thoughts which came to my mind in a very brief manner.
Sir, is it possible to take one question?
Okay,
I
yeah,
have got.
I'm already late. I don't know what will happen. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. The thing is that how serious a cybersecurity threat is China, considering, I mean, cyber warfare is one of the main arsenals it has against, okay, quote unquote, an enemy country. And related to it, in terms of when you're talking about 30% communication devices and all, they are indigenous. Okay, I'll just stick to how serious is a threat, China.
No, the threat is, it's real, it's happening every day. As certain will tell you, India is facing hundreds of cyber attacks, purely the ones which they detect. The point I'm making is, there are threats which we have still not started accounting for. The kind of data leakage, for example, we don't account for the amount of data that is going and being used against us in various other ways. We are not accounting for all the information war that is going on, which we are still not accounting for all the backdoors which we have not discovered. So while there are these obvious cyber attacks that are happening, there are a large number of others and threats that have been created, which we have no way to really know about it and to measure them also as of today. So there is a very today with cyber is omnipresent today. There is hardly anything that we do which is not cyber related, and wherever there is cyber, there is a potential vulnerability. So unless we address it to the core, we go to the devices, we go to the solutions, create real Atmanirbharta is required in cyber more than anywhere else because of the kind of threats it creates. So
Okay.
yes, it's very real and it's happening as we speak.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sparing this time.